All right. Good morning. Good morning, NextOppSocial family. Welcome to another live discussion here at NextOppSocial. Today you have myself, Richelle Wright, as always, joined by Joanne. And before we get into it, I just want to remind you to hit that subscribe button to this channel. That way you're always present for these lives, or you can check out the replay and you never miss out on a discussion. So don't forget to do that. I'm excited today. Joanne had mentioned this a little bit earlier this week, but we wanted to take today to kind of do some reflection, right, on our past episodes. So as I was just telling before, I can't believe we've been doing this for almost 7 months now, week in and week out. And we just want to kind of take some time today to go back through all of our guests have been incredible, and they've all shared incredible stories, incredible wisdom, things that should be rewatched all the time, because you never know where you are at in your journey where you're going to be able to grab some really amazing nuggets of wisdom from. But that's what we're going to do today. We're going to talk about some of our favorite moments, our favorite takeaways, and hopefully encourage you that if you haven't seen either all of our episodes or certain ones that maybe you missed, that you can go back and check those out.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. The more I kind of reflect on the discussion we had before we got started now, and even kind of looking at my notes, I remember we first started this journey, right? And I tell people all the time, it wasn't like we were trying to be famous or we were just love talking about business,
Yeah.
Love talking about helping entrepreneurs level up and being students of business, and just the fun and excitement of building things and making a contribution. And in many respects, I feel very fortunate that people have seen or been able to derive value, right? Because really at the end of the day, all we're doing is continuing the conversation that we started having when we first met, right? I remember that conversation vividly, talking about client services and customer service and how important it is to pay close attention to the nuances of that, and why it's one of the most neglected aspects of business, but the most important, right? Client services is your front face, is your back face, it's everything. It's the guts of your business, it's everything, right? And so it's been fun. This project has taken on a life of its own in many respects. And to be transparent with you, is one of those things where I look forward to this. This is like one of the highlights of the week.
Yeah.
It doesn't. Yeah, So we've been fortunate. We've had some really dynamic personalities who participated with NextOppSocial and NextOppSocial. And as I was kind of perusing the episodes, one that stood out to me was a relatively recent one we had with Miss Nina Payne. And she shared, of course, some invaluable insights in terms of what entrepreneurship means, particularly in the event planning industry, and how she's had to pivot during the pandemic. But I'll tell you, the most powerful thing I drew from that interview was actually her background.
Yeah. I was listening to that again this morning, too, as I was recapping this.
Yeah. And when you look at, literally in the background of the interview, you saw her vision board. Where she had her goals and she had her values and she had projected certain things she wanted to accomplish. It wasn't sales projections. It wasn't KPIs. It was literally what she envisioned for herself and what was most important to her. And of course, what really caught my attention when I looked at her vision board was the fact that it wasn't just all business goals, right? She had some personal and family goals up there. She had some real purpose. What is that? Purpose-driven life, I think is the name of the book. I can't remember it. But that's what I was thinking about when I was looking at that interview and literally staring into her background. That was a huge nugget that I think individuals sometimes lose sight of, right? Because entrepreneurship is not easy, and, we know that most heart attacks happen Monday morning. They happen Monday morning because it's hard to put your life's energies behind a compromise. People wake up every Monday and I think they're having heart attacks because, number one, they're about to go to a place where they don't want to be. They're doing work that really doesn't fulfill them, and they're surrounded by people that, quite frankly, they really don't like.
Yeah.
And what entrepreneurship allows you to do is actually curate a different life. You know, you can choose your partners, you can choose your clients, you can choose your lifestyle. I mean, it's just cause and effect. Put in more work, you know, put more wood on fire, you get more results, right? Or vice versa. So, you know, I just can't help but smile when I think about that particular interview.
Mm-hmm. She's definitely one too. When I was also listening to it, I was reminded about how many of our interviews, when we talk about like their how they got started, right, with entrepreneurship and whatnot, how so many of them got started really early, some as early as high school, right? And what I think is so great about hearing each of their stories, but especially those who started early, is that they didn't necessarily always get into entrepreneurship because they're like, that's what I'm going to do, right? It was that they saw something that either needed to be different, they found a better way to do something, they felt that whatever the option was before that they had was not an option anymore, and this is just something they knew that there was no turning back around from whatever they were going to move forward with in their journey. And I think Nina was a really good example of that as well, because she got started very, very early with finding those moments for herself where she was like, okay, this has to be different. I can do this, I can do that. And just no, and it wasn't just this drive of like her feeling like it can be done. It's that she felt like it needed to be done, especially for her industry.
Yeah, as I reflect on that, I was also thinking about those entrepreneurs that started early where it was also kind of like in their DNA, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like entrepreneurship was going to happen, not necessarily because they viewed themselves as entrepreneurs, but because the environment almost compelled them to do so, right?
Yeah.
And of course, the one person I'm thinking about is Miss Sharon Madison,
Mm-hmm.
right? For me, that interview was very interesting because some people from the outside looking in would assume, well, she had all advantages, right? Parents and grandparents who were entrepreneurial, who supported entrepreneurship, believed in it. Already that kind of legacy and that fertile soil, right? And the acceptance of entrepreneurship models that you can look at and pull from who are successful in their own right. It wasn't like she had to start from scratch. It's almost like, I mean, I can't imagine like growing up as a child and being in an environment where everyone in your family is a biochemist, right?
Right.
And it's like the books are around you, the conversations are around you, you're seeing them teaching. I mean, it gets in you, right?
Mm-hmm.
And to be in an environment like that, but for her also to still keep it real, like despite all those supposed advantages, entrepreneurship is entrepreneurship, and there was a price to be paid. That it's still not. I guess what I liked most is she could have easily jumped into that interview and gave a nice rosy picture and outlook and just simply shared the veneer.
Right.
But instead, she talked about how no, despite all these different advantages, despite environment support, entrepreneurship is not flag football. It's not this grandiose experience where there's nothing but success and accoutrements and gifts and all this other stuff. You have to work for it. There's going to be pitfalls. There's going to be challenges. It doesn't matter what level you reach. Success is always going to be found outside your comfort zone, which means you're going to get uncomfortable and you're going to fail forward and you're going to have some disappointments and you're going to have some challenges. And listening to her was a reminder that at the end of the day is what it is, right? It doesn't matter what level of success you achieve. There are problems out there and you're only as good as the problems that you can solve. And so, you know, just thinking about that, or how people have gotten their start, whether it was later on in life or whether it was right from the cradle, right? That the game is the game, so to speak. So me, I mean, just thinking about it's fascinating. You already know I can talk about that for the next 2-3 hours and wouldn't lose a beat, right? I wouldn't need to catch my breath. So thinking about that was exciting to me. I'm thinking about Berhinda, Miss
Yeah.
Berhinda Williams.
Mm-hmm.
And it's fascinating. Like, I would have never thought to build a business around empathy. I would have never thought to do that.
I guess in my world where I'm at with marketing, there's a lot of, I've watched just the coaching industry blow up in front of me, right?
Mhm.
And how many different avenues coaches have taken, to find really their sweet spot of who they serve. And it's always interesting to find someone who has really tapped into, well, I serve the psychographics of people rather than a demographic of people, right? Whereas so many other coaches, they're serving a demographic of people, or, but yes, to surround your coaching around something so specific like that, like empathy and highly sensitive people and stuff like that. That is a level of self-awareness in yourself, of understanding, if you understand that amount of yourself, right, to be able to work through that and have the confidence to then help others who have those same experiences. That's powerful, because that speaks to so many other areas of whatever those people are doing,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was also a reminder too, because to be transparent, I mean, working with entrepreneurs and business owners for almost 2 decades now. Every time I say it, it's a reminder that I really have been on earth for a little while, right? I'm not a 20-year-old anymore. I would have dissuaded that if a business owner would have walked into my office and said, I want to start a business around empathy, and I would have immediately dissuaded them for the reason you just shared, right? Everybody in your mind wants to be a personal life coach.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody, you have all these people who've read one book, watched one video, and now they're dispensing advice. They're leading people where they haven't gone. They're trying to talk people into doing things, and they haven't grown those areas themselves. And I would have just said, look, what you're doing is the equivalent of starting up a hair salon on Livernois. There's 20 million of them there. They're all making money, but no one is elevating, so to speak, right? They're not able to transcend because they're all fighting over the same pie. Do something different. And for me, one of the biggest lessons I pulled from that Berhinda Williams interview was that, look, the bottom line is, if you're really good at something, if you're really passionate about it, if you're really willing to master it, right? Put in the 10,000 hours like Malcolm Gladwell talks about. I think that was his book, Outliers, right? If you're willing to become elite at something and pay the price, do it. Do it, because people will pay. If you give people 5-star treatment, they'll pay for it, no matter what it is that you do. So if you're able to put yourself in a position where you're giving people 5-star treatment service products in any field or endeavor, of course, it can be 8-track tapes, but who knows? You might find some people out there that want to buy vintage 8-track tapes. Right?
Mm-hmm.
If you're passionate about it, and you can create a platform where people would tune into it or buying old records, whatever the case may be, it was a reminder that I'm not omnipotent. These business coaches and gurus are not omnipotent. The market is the market, and you don't get to determine what the market likes and knows. You have to go out there and test it yourself, right? And for me, Belinda was she just exemplified that. Like, that was an exciting interview to listen to that. It was humbling. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Another one that we had that honestly was the one we had last week was with Tanya Myers Phillips. I thought that was such a powerful interview, and so much of it was interesting because we're here talking about entrepreneurship, but I really feel like a biggest part of the takeaway of that interview, which was because she kept rooting it in this idea of that entrepreneurship is not just this like one lane of thing that you do, right? And you can have passion for other things, especially in terms of helping your community and being an activist and things like that, and that how those things, they go together. And it's important that your other personal morals and your personal whys are rooted in your entrepreneurship journey. I thought that was so important to overly emphasize, which is she did from so many different angles with so many different examples. So I really, appreciated all that different insight that she gave around, how are you, like, being an entrepreneur is political. It is, like, whether you want it to be or not. It just, that's the reality of it. And that's not to say we're getting in Twitter fights or whatever because we're entrepreneurs, but you can't just ignore what's happening around you because you're just trying to build this life for yourself. And she gave such great takeaways and action steps for people to really, find their purpose behind why they're so passionate about building a life for themselves and how it's going to benefit others.
Yeah. Passion.
Yeah.
Right. Passion. Listen to her reminded me that entrepreneurship, I mean, you hit it on the head, you use the word political. I like to think about it as entrepreneurship is akin to activism, right? And when you're an activist, it's like you're wearing your feelings on your sleeve. Like you're literally wearing it on your skin. When you're an activist, I mean, people know who you are. You can't hide, right? Because you're out there promoting the ideal, you're out there promoting the concept, you're out there promoting something that you believe will truly make a difference in people's lives. And so there's no hiding, there's no ducking, there's no falsehood, there's not room for it when you're an activist. And yeah, I mean, the way you just kind of encapsulated that, entrepreneurship can be the exact same way. I mean, there's no room. People know what your priorities are. People know who you are and what you're about based on your entrepreneurial activity or quite frankly, lack thereof, right? There's no hiding. Yeah, that was fascinating. It took me back to that, and how, I guess the lesson that I would hope listeners would take from that is, if you're not passionate about your thing, if you're not excited about your thing, it's a false expectation to believe other people will be. Right. And passion can be exhibited a lot of different ways. I mean, Miss Tanya Myers-Phillips is not the type of person to jump up and down and throw a party and, paparazzi it out and all that fun stuff. You're not going to get that from her. But she has this, it's almost like a hum of intensity, right?
Oh yeah, I could listen to her for hours. Her cadence was very captivating.
Yes. Yeah. Gosh, I mean, it's so many.
I think about the only one that we got to do, we streamed it to YouTube, but we did it in person, was Tony Stovall, when we got to go to Hot Sam's and interview him. And that was he had so much great wisdom and insight, and his story is so incredible. But what I really, truly enjoyed, especially out of that experience, was getting to interview someone, not that we're not interviewing people in their space, but a lot of these people are at home, right? And some of these people do have brick and mortar, but we got to interview him in his element, and that energy was different in some cases. And Hot Sam's is a big store, and his energy filled up that store for sure. And then some, it's all downtown Detroit. He's got that energy for it. But I thought that was really fun to be able to, it brought a different level of attention and excitement to a certain level into the interview, when someone is literally opening up at their shop to greet customers for the day, and we're there kind of in the thick of that.
Yeah, it's like I said before, I mean, so much of entrepreneurship and people's perception of it is the KPIs. It is the numbers, the cash flow, the balance sheet, the cash flows. I mean, all those things are exceptionally important, right? The strategy, the marketing, the advertising, the tools you're using, the platforms you're promoting. But I think a metaphor I would use is like, you have two coffee shops, right, across the street from each other. And of course, besides the business acumen, decisions, and work ethic, what's going to determine whether or not people frequent one coffee shop or the other? And it's a reminder of the axiom that's so tried and true. People don't care what you know. They don't care what you're doing until they know that you care, right? People remember how they feel when they have conversations with people. They remember how they feel when they walk into a space. And like you said before, I can imagine people walking into that space has to be intoxicating. They come in there for a suit, probably end up having a 2-3 hour long conversation about
Yeah,
a
there's no
myriad
doubt.
of different things, right? You know how important that is. Particularly, and I think it's very applicable if you are a solo entrepreneur working from your living room or dining room or from a coffee shop or me in the basement to get away from the kids, right? You still have to have that energy and passion that you bring to the table so people can actually feel it. And this is solo definitely makes you feel it. You're gonna feel something if you don't walk in the shop. You know, another interview that I thought was really fascinating was Jay Donovan Smith's interview. And it's an interview that's easy to look over because he was actually in the midst of work too.
Yeah, he had to take some calls and all that. Yeah.
Yeah. So that was fascinating. And we didn't get to ask like the multitude of questions that we typically would because of the situation. But when he talked about the idea of literally failing, right? Starting up a business, down to his last dollar, life is sucking. Most people would have thrown in the towel, would have quit. And listening to him was a reminder of two things. And number one, entrepreneurial experience is accumulative. It's almost like investing, right? When you start out investing, you don't see the reward right away, right? It's the accumulation of deposits. It's the accumulation of interest that begins to compound. And that's why you ask people, look, you know, if I gave you a penny that compounded every single day for the next 30 days versus $1 million, people who don't understand that they choose $1 million, not realizing they will miss out on millions upon millions upon millions of dollars because of the compound interest, right? And entrepreneurship works the exact same way. Like, he didn't quit because he had all that compounding experience and interest, right? He had a plan. He had a mission, and he had faith. And when you take all of that together and combine it with work, right? Willing to do the work, you're never really broke as an entrepreneur, right? You're never really broke if you're doing all those things. You're not failing. You're just learning. You're getting better. And I just firmly believe that the universe will conspire in your favor. Might not when you want it to, right? You may have to make some pivots, do some different things, but eventually the universe will conspire in your favor, right?
Yeah.
I thought that was huge. I thought that was so huge. That was such an important lesson.
Yeah. Yeah. So many of our people too have multiple businesses and they do multiple different things. And I think what I'm glad that we asked each one of them that did have that was, how do you juggle that? How do you successfully manage those things? Because I think as entrepreneurs, we're always going to be idea people. We always like that beginning stage of the exciting new idea and the possibility of it. And it's very easy. It is even very easy, I think, as a seasoned entrepreneur to get started on that idea and start rolling with it and not realize as you're doing it that you're taking away from other aspects of things that you might be stretching yourself too thin. So what I really enjoyed about, certain people like Kira Johnson was one of them, who she runs 3, if not more, different businesses, and how she balances that, and how not just how she balances it, but how she understands how to give and take with her time based on what needs more attention, and how to properly delegate things out so that those things can be set up for the long run, not to just need her, and I think that's what's really, really important about especially the people we talk to who have multiple businesses, is that they're not just creating these businesses for themselves and to only run because of their expertise. They need these things to run on their own so that they can continue to give, and build. So I always thought that was really fascinating, because so many of us, well, especially during the pandemic, and we had talked about it in a lot of our one-on-one interviews, of the shiny object syndrome is very prevalent right now, especially people making masks. And I know that there's some businesses that have been very, very successful with pivoting and being financially, readily compensated for making these masks. But already there's articles about that's on the decline. So that was 6 months. And if you thought so it's just really understanding that shiny object syndrome, and how to really know the difference between what's going to be this big viable business and what is just something that looks flashy right now.
Yeah. Something else that I pulled from that interview and then listening to you really kind of triggered something in me, and that was the ideal of, oftentimes we have a weird relationship with money, right?
Yeah.
And you hear that axiom, money isn't everything. And, as an entrepreneur, it's the lifeblood of everything you do. There's no getting around it. Like, you can't take that attitude into entrepreneurship. Yeah, your business needs to be profitable.
Right.
It needs to be able to scale. It needs to be able to grow. So you can, yes, take care of your family, curate the lifestyle that you want. But if your business doesn't grow, if it doesn't scale, you can't impact others, right? Because there's a lot of people right now running around here who own businesses on paper, but the reality matter, the business owns them, right? They have no time freedom. They don't have the time to give back to church or give back to an organization or be involved in a political campaign. They don't have the time. They don't have the time to give their children and to their family members who may be in need because their business owns them. They can't do or be involved in the community endeavors, whether it be at the election polls or, giving up time, being altruistic at Focus Hope or whatever, because their business actually owns them. And that's such an important piece. Like, yes, your business needs to be profitable. Yes, you need to scale, you need to grow, you need to be an employer. That's how you become influential and impact people's lives. And her interview is a perfect example of that. And I'm so glad you mentioned that, because I remember the interview, but I missed that nugget and I was reflecting on it. That's so absolutely important. Nothing breaks my heart more than when I sit down with a business owner and I ask the business owner, where are you going to be 5-10 years from now? And they don't have a clue. They don't have a vision. They don't see themselves growing beyond where they're at. Like, they're just in survival mode, taking money out the register, paying their bills, and hoping and praying they wake up the following day and the same thing happens again, right?
Yeah.
And it's not to look down on business owners who are underneath those circumstances, but it is a challenge to say, look, as an entrepreneur, you can accomplish so much. You can impact people's lives in such a positive way. You can have such an important influence in terms of your family lineage and the people around you, that it's almost, it's not almost, it's your responsibility to be successful as an entrepreneur. Particularly once you start taking on employees, it's your responsibility to be successful, to be profitable. And her interviews are a real good reminder of that.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. It was another one. We're just like going through them all, but they were also good. But another one that was, I thought was cool that we got to do our first, I think she was our first guest, was Tina Williams, when we talked at the beginning of April, and how what was so beneficial to that, or about that, was she just walked everyone through how to get PPP and how to get this money that was available to businesses, and to a certain extent, I think might still be available if you need it. And walking through that, and then talking with her many, many months later to see how her business had shifted, how her clients what they had been doing, right? Just from talking to her at the beginning of all of this too. So, I mean, she offers such great, straightforward advice and insight so that people can take away and take action with it. Very, she honestly makes it quite simple, right? It doesn't need, what I like about what she presents is that she's dealing with money and paperwork and government stuff, and all of that can feel very overwhelming and very complicated, but she can break it down in a way that not only feels simple, but instills confidence of, like, you know, she's the person you should utilize, because she's going to make it easy for you to access that. And I think that was always a really good trait out of all of our interviewers, was just their level of confidence in what they were doing and their ability to articulate really well what they do and their expertise to make it, especially if you're watching any of those and you're in a place where you need where you can utilize their help, that they should be obvious choices for you, you know, because I could see at any point where it's like, you know, you need events, you need this, you need help with creative stuff, you need help with whatever. They all exuded that professional expertise and confidence in what they were doing, that made them all like no brainers in terms of like, yeah, utilize these people.
Yeah. Yeah. What is confidence, right? What is confidence? It's, in my humble opinion, you're not confident until you have, quote unquote, on an academic or intellectual level, you know what your value prop is, and you can speak to it, right? That builds confidence when you know what you know. And that does not mean that you are know-it-all, because the one thing, like one example I can think of is Wendy Hooker, right?
Yeah.
She's achieved on a high level. I mean, highly intelligent, highly focused, very structured. Like, frankly, you can plug her into any company, any organization, any endeavor, and she's gonna crush it, you know, with those attributes that she has. But even in listening to her, she still knew there were things she did not know. And she was humble and open and willing to learn, right? So striking that balance, right? Knowing what you know and being confident in that. And then practice, right? Actually practicing, being a practitioner, right? It just can't be academic alone. And, you know, I say this all the time. I know it's probably redundant, but, you know, you can't lead people where you have not gone, and you can't help people in ways in which you haven't grown, right? And Ms. Tina Williams is a perfect example. Like, you can tell she's not only just out here proliferating this information, she's doing it. She's doing the things that she's teaching other people to do, right? That's what I've always loved about her, just the transparency and how candid she is. And you know she's doing the work that she's speaking about, right? So knowing what you know and what you don't know, and being very strong in that, doing the work, right? And then, of course, the good thing about when you fall and smack your face on the floor, when you stand up again, you kind of check yourself out and you realize, okay, my mouth, my jaw, my ears, my eyes are still there. So you're not, and then you fall again. It's the same thing. Like, okay, it's all still there. Okay. You know, when you smack your head against something enough times, you also realize that you're not afraid of it anymore. You're not afraid of failing as long as you're learning the lesson, right? And that's important too, because a lot of these entrepreneurs did talk frequently about times they have failed miserably, where they were like, what in the world is going on? I don't have the answers, right? I'm thinking about Ms. Sharon Madsen in particular. Such humility, right? That speaks to the fact that there have been many times where she's reached a certain level in her business, been confronted with a certain problem, and you have to be willing to go to people who have answers that you don't have and ask for help.
Yeah.
You have to be willing to do that, right? And that's, in my mind, that's what confidence is, right? Having that combination, and that came through in almost every interview we did, right? One person in particular I'm thinking about is Miss Minta Charles. I mean, talk about similar situation with Nina Payne, right? To be a creative in event promotions. As a matter of fact, not just promoting events, but staging events.
Yeah.
And then being also compensated, find talent to make sure these events transpire. And then all of a sudden, events come to a screeching halt, right? And what in the world do you do next? When that's your business model, live events. And for her to turn around and literally create a business around promoting online events and still managing talent and understanding and having her ear to the ground and understanding what's going on in the marketplace and still what's needed, that was powerful to me, because she's another person that had every reason to quit, go get a W-2 job and kind of wait this thing out. And she's like, no, I'm gonna wake up every single day and I'm gonna figure this thing out, right? And I'm not gonna be afraid. I'm gonna fail repeatedly over and over again, but I'm still gonna get at this, right? And that interview reminded me of that, this conversation as well. Like, it's a powerful interview for people to listen to.
Yeah, absolutely. We've had so many incredible interviews. And I think what I really appreciate also in between those interviews is I was counting up how many of these we've done, just you and I, and it's 13 of those in itself. I know. And now we're on 14 because this is 14. But what's great is that within those stories and all of those people that we interview offer tactical, actionable advice. But what I love about our one-on-ones is we're able to take some of those concepts and go deeper into it as more actionable advice that you can take action on right away, right? So things like defining your target audience. You know, we talk extensively about that anyway, but what does that look like? How do you do that? Why is it important? And another one was that kind of went with that was branding, right? To stand yourself out from your competition, right? Why it is so important. I think all of our discussions are rooted in the why, right? We talk about all the time, like everything's got to be rooted in your why. But all of those areas were, you know, to a certain extent inspired by a lot of these stories and opportunities that we have with these interviews, where we can take something, go deeper into it so that, you know, our audience can really understand what that means and how to do that in their own business.
Mm-hmm. You know, as I was looking through my notes, there was something that popped up repeatedly over and over again. And I really value our one-on-ones because I've learned so much just from listening to you. And I had a blind spot, right? When we started this project, I had a huge blind spot. And I didn't think about it often, but the ideal of mental and psychological health and wellness, right? Just thinking about our interactions and the type of conversations we had, I will admit that was a huge blind spot for me, right? My attitude has always been, so what? Challenges come up, issues are going to transpire, you're paid based on your ability to overcome, right? But it does not necessarily mean that you can ignore those challenges and issues. They have an impact, they shape you, right? Depending upon whether you deal with them or not, they still shape you. And ignoring mental and psychological health and wellness is not courageous. It's actually poor health management, right? It's actually courageous to admit the fact that, yeah, you are fatigued. It's courageous to admit the fact that you are grieving, that you are made of, you know, corrugated iron, that, you know, you can break. You can be sapped of your energy, that terrible things can happen, and you have to take the time to deal with those things, right?
Yeah.
And so often when you're watching these YouTube videos and you're looking at quote unquote heroes and heroines, it's like they're projected as individuals who don't feel pain, who don't hurt,
Yeah.
who don't deal with internal strife and heartache, when the reality matter is just the opposite. Just because you become an entrepreneur, that stuff doesn't stop, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you have to take the time to do what you need to do, learn what you need to learn, surround yourself with the right people that will challenge you to deal with those things and
Mm-hmm.
challenge you to think differently about entrepreneurship. And you know, that's one of the most beautiful things that this is what I've always appreciated about our relationship, right? I remember from the beginning, I was like, Rochelle is a pretty straightforward person. I don't get that too often. You know, you really do. You really do say what's on your mind. When I say she's a real deal Holyfield, you know anything about Vander Holyfield? Vander Holyfield got in the ring to beat you up. You know, you knew you were in a fight when you got into the ring with Holyfield. And having conversations with you, I know I am in a conversation with someone that's going to challenge and be transparent and be forthright. And you need those type of people in your life to keep you honest, you know, and keep you grounded. So I've always appreciated about you. And that mental health piece has been so important to me.
Yeah. No, likewise. I always, like you said as well, I look forward to our Wednesdays, and it's, I take so much away from not just when we're interviewing people, but when we have these discussions with each other, because I'm always learning from all of what you're reflecting on, right? Because it's sometimes even you're in that moment and something, you can see that aha moment that comes from you, and you're able to share that, and it's just so valuable. And one thing I will say too that I've taken away from this is that a lot of my entrepreneurial spirit is rooted in that I just hate routines. Like, I'm just bad at routine. Well, I'm not bad at them. My body is just like, no, like, don't do that, So it's not to say that I don't have routines, and it's not to say that I don't stick with things consistently. But this has been quite an experience of every Wednesday at 10 a.m. this is happening, that has pushed me to really watch consistency in other areas. Well, I'm always preaching consistency with marketing and whatever, but it's interesting. It's been so fascinating and so amazing to watch what consistency and just how you can grow from, we can grow from each other and whatnot, just over 6-7 months of that consistency in that area too. I think it's just, that in itself has been so valuable. And there have been times where, because like you were saying with this, we decided to start this at the beginning of a pandemic, right? And then
Yeah.
so there's that. Then there's a lot of, political, racial, economical, all kinds of things happening in the middle of that affect us. And then we each have our own personal battles that we're having. And there'd be many weeks where I'd be like, well, do we just need to skip it? We just need a break or whatever. And you're like, no, like, we're doing this. And to that extent, I appreciate that, because it would have been very, very easy for me to be like, oh, it's fine, we'll do it next week, whatever,
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of power in that in itself too, of just sticking with something for any period of time.
Yeah, it reminds me of a book by Darren Hardy called The Compound Effect. Right? Yeah, what you do and the spirit you go about doing it does shape you. I guess I keep coming back to that. I think the metaphor anecdote I've heard most frequently about this, you have two people who walk into a fast food restaurant, right? One person gets the fattest, sloppiest, greasiest, sauce-laden thing they can find and shove it down their throat as quickly as possible. The next person walks into the restaurant and they eat the salad, right? And there's no difference between them that first day. The following day, they're going to look the same. They're going to smell the same. It's going to be the same person. But let 10 days go by, that same habit, right?
Mm-hmm.
And, person A, the waistline starts to expand a little bit. You can kind of smell them coming when they're broken a sweat. They start looking a little bit shiny and greasy, right? And then you look up 20 days and it's like, okay, is this the same person? And by that 30th day, one person is headed toward a cardiac arrest, and the other person is the same person that they started out with when they walked into the restaurant, right? And business and life can be a lot like that, right? There's a book out there by Napoleon Hill called Outwitting the Devil, where he really talks about that, right? The daily decisions, the commitments that we make, and how our commitments shape us. And I think our experience with Next Opportunity Social is a perfect example of that, right? Coming here week in and week out has shaped me in certain ways, right? Getting that positive reinforcement from our guests, from you, it's beginning to shape me in ways that are really, it's exciting and fun, and you kind of start to project out because you kind of see the results coming, right? And I imagine you have felt the exact same way in many respects.
Yeah, absolutely.
And yeah, that's, for me, that's what makes this endeavor special. And this is what I would hope that our listeners are deriving as well. That whether you're tuning in once, twice, whether you're tuned in for every episode, that you leave better than when you came.
Yeah.
And that at the end of the day, that these episodes can kind of, there's a book by Warren Buffett, I think it's an autobiography, not his biography, it's called Snowball, right? And each chapter is kind of like snowflakes that result in a snowball, which is his tremendous success and level of achievement that he has attained. And I would hope that Next Opportunity Social serves as the same for individuals who are participating. And of course, for us who are actually committed to making this happen. So yeah, it's been exceptionally rewarding. Exceptionally rewarding.
Yeah.
I'm thankful for this. Yeah.
Me too. Well, NextOppSocial family, we're going to end there. But before we do, again, a reminder, subscribe. And also, though, we're going to keep showing up week after week. We have incredible guests that we're going to keep bringing. We're probably going to bring some of our other guests back. It's always fun to reflect with them as well around what they've been doing. But truthfully, we want to hear from you as well, especially if you've like Joanne said, maybe you've only watched an episode or two, or maybe you've watched all of them. Regardless, if there's something that you're looking for more insight around, more education around, more experience around, let us know. And we'll add that into the mix because we want to make sure that this serves you as well. So on that note, we will see you next week. Thank you again.